In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, Leif Thulin is going to share his thoughts on the Charlotte Hornets' best options at number 4. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, along with my co-host, the man that watches more college basketball than anyone else, Leif Thulin. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, share, comment, and click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode. Leif and I just recorded an episode earlier where we talked about Jeremiah Fears or VJ Edgecombe. The consensus online is pointing towards VJ Edgecombe, but Leif and I, we kind of lean a little bit more towards Jeremiah Fears. I mentioned some of the dialogue that I've had with NBA scouts and even college coaches about the two. So if you missed that episode, be sure to check it out. And this episode is all about the Charlotte Hornets. I think Charlotte has a very interesting decision to make at number 4. Obviously, their decision could depend on what Philadelphia does at number 3 and what trades are made. I think that there's going to be some trades. I think there are some teams that are aggressively looking to move up in the draft. Charlotte is a team that I haven't heard much chatter about them as far as moving their pick, but I have heard that they are possibly looking to package 33 and 34 in the second round to move up to pick later on in the first round. But let's just get right to it. The Charlotte Hornets are at number 4. In your opinion, who should they take at number 4? And let's just go with the consensus from a week ago before the Ace Bailey news that dropped today came out. And let's just say that's all smokescreen. Philadelphia goes with Ace Bailey at number 3. Who are you taking at 4?
I would take Tre Johnson. I would be devastated for my Utah Jazz in that case. But if I were the Hornets, I'd take the best player available. And I also think there is a fit here where you could see the dynamic ability of Tre Johnson coming off the ball, and LaMelo Ball's gravity creates great shots for who I deem to be the best shooter that will go in the first round. So I would take him. I don't think that allows Tre Johnson to be the best version of himself as the roster is currently constructed, because I see him as someone with the ball in his hands. But the way it's built, I think you're taking the best shooter, and I think you're taking a guy who's got athletic upside and someone who could score 25 points a game in the NBA. And Charlotte's got issues with taking a lot of athletes, and they've talked about taking these different athletes and how they're going to take these longer wings, and then people say the opposite of, they need to take an athlete, so everyone's slotted VJ Edgecombe in. But I think Tre Johnson is the best of both worlds as someone who's skillful and athletic, and so I would take him. I don't hate the idea of taking a Kon Knueppel fit-wise, but I'm a best player available believer, and I think it's clearly Tre Johnson at this point. So I would take Tre Johnson. The rumors are telling me it's VJ Edgecombe, though, if he's there at 4.
Yeah, I mean, there are some rumors that saying Edgecombe can go as high as number 3. One of the things I've consistently heard over the past 2 weeks is that Charlotte is going to really, 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 really value character and intel. And I think Charlotte is hard to judge because naturally you think of the Charlotte Hornets as the team that has made some crazy picks over the last 5 or 6 years. But this is a totally different front office. The front office that whiffed on the 2021 draft is gone. It's actually a new ownership group. They shouldn't be judged off of Charlotte's recent drafts. This is totally different. But with that being said, I think that maybe they're being penalized a little bit because of the previous group, which had some players that ran into some character issues. I don't need to go by the names and so on. And that could be the reason why they are rumored to really, really value intel. And from everything that I've heard, like Kon Knueppel's intel is like A1. Just like clean as clean can be. And then in the range, they're saying like VJ Edgecombe is like super likable. He has great intel. So with that being said, Do you think that is the right move for Charlotte based off of, some of the picks from the past, their reputation? Because I want to say like 2 years ago, there were some teams or some agents that I heard that didn't want to send their clients to Charlotte just because they felt like, I got a young kid, he's 18 or 19, and I don't know if that locker room is the best for him to maximize his potential and develop, just because they were a team that just had some young guys that really like enjoy the NBA lifestyle a lot. So with that being said, do you think it's fair for Charlotte to have to maybe overvalue Intel because of the past ownership group or the past front office?
Yeah, you can't outrun the sins of the predecessors, so to speak. Or there's a lot of cliches that are spoken about in sport, and there's a lot of cliches and shows, and they talk about like rewriting history to correct the past wrongs. And I think that's what might happen here. Like if Charlotte were to take Kon Knueppel, it may very well work out to be a fine pick. I don't see the reason you would take him over some of the players that have a higher upside as potential stars. Like Tre Johnson, to me, can be an all-star, someone who can score 25 a game. And I think he's an even better shooter than Kon. So the reason would be because of A1 intel. And I don't think that there's any bad intel on Tre Johnson, at least none that I've heard. It would just be that he'd be plenty happy to play that role. And I think drafting for role and fit and intel based gets into making safe picks. And I don't think that scared money is going to make money in the sense of the way that the Hornets are set. They're not a well-built team yet. Like, yes, they have talented players in the likes of Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball, but neither of those guys have proven anything to say this is the guy who's going to win us a championship. So why take a guy to complement them and just make them 2 games better, if that? And so I don't love that idea. The Edgecombe idea is fascinating, and I've been on the records critical of Edgecombe. And it's critical in the sense of I don't see him as a top 3 value pick. I don't see him as a top 5 value. It's not against that he's good. Like I see what the traits people are saying. It's just like if you're picking on solely traits, then that's a dangerous proposition. I think Charlotte's made that mistake many times. And even though it is a different regime, they've taken a lot of tremendous athletes that have been lacking the requisite skill. And it hasn't worked. And in all of those cases, it has not worked. So I'd be very curious to see why the intel is so strong that he is so far ahead of, like if he makes it out of 4, I think it's on ESPN I read today. If he makes it outside of 4, everyone will be stunned, meaning he's going to be picked by Philly or Charlotte. That shocks me. And because like that's a mistake that Charlotte has made. And so if you're trying to pick intel over, these low character guys that have cost them before, the high athleticism, even if there have been high character, haven't worked particularly well. So I have my qualms with Edgecombe altogether, but I think Charlotte, if they were to make their pick solely based on correcting their wrongs, that becomes a very interesting way to justify a pick.
Yeah, I actually heard this comment from an agent who doesn't represent anybody involved in the process. And he said there's just a total difference of philosophy between Philadelphia and Charlotte. He said Daryl Morey is not a guy that cares a whole lot about intel. As long as you're not like, a crazy criminal or everything, Daryl Morey is like, can you play? Can you hoop? We'll figure everything else out. As long as you're just, not disruptive in the locker room or just Daryl Morey is about buckets in basketball and can you play? But I've heard, like I said, Charlotte is in a situation where they're going to really value the intel. So I have a question for you. When we return, and I'm gonna give you a second to think about this. Let's say VJ Edgecombe goes number 3, and Charlotte is at 4, but the guy they really like is Kon Knueppel. Do you see a way that they can work out a deal with the Pelicans, who are rumored to like Ace Bailey, where the Pelicans can move up to 4, get Ace Bailey, and then Charlotte is able to get the guy that they like, who actually kind of complements what they already have, if they should trade down to get Kon Knueppel? So I want to hear your thoughts on that. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, and the fans losing their mind. It is the kind of atmosphere that you must experience live. And this year's NBA Finals have already delivered. And if you want in, Game Time makes it easy and fast to get seats, even for the biggest playoff events like the NBA Finals. Prices on the app are actually dropping closer to tip-off, and they have killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees. And Game Time is a total game changer. What I love about the app is that I can see my exact view of the seat before I buy, so there's no surprises. The app is very simple. A couple taps, and you're done. And with the Game Time guarantee, you know that you're getting the best deal, because if you find a better price in the same row and section, they will credit you 110% of the difference. And the NFL just released their schedule, and with Game Time, you can find seats for less than $100. And with the Game Time guarantee, your seats are 100% authentic and they will arrive on time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, second segment. So I just proposed a trade for Leif on the spot, and this is just me thinking out loud here. Philadelphia goes with VJ Edgecombe at 3. Ace Bailey is sitting there at number 4. But according to Kevin O'Connor from Yahoo, the New Orleans Pelicans are one of the teams that are reportedly interested in moving up to get Ace Bailey. The Pelicans just made a trade where they picked up the 23rd pick from the Indiana Pacers. So do you think it's a situation where Charlotte could say, all right, we'll move down to number 7, we'll pick up 23, and then we can get the guy that we like that fits what we're doing in Kon Knueppel? Do you think that's a trade that makes sense?
It comes with a risk, obviously, because trading down is never a popular thing to do in the NBA. It's not as well liked as it is in football. And it becomes a question of, is Kon still going to be there? Because by all accounts, he's moving up the draft too. So while your question is to me, would I do it if it worked? Absolutely, I would. Because I think they'd probably, if they're valuing Intel and the recent smoke and all this stuff, probably don't want to take Ace Bailey. And Ace Bailey and Brandon Miller are a bit redundant, even though that is kind of what the NBA is. So I don't actually have much of an issue with it. Like, you want long wings. So why if you have two that are similar and have similar deficiencies but are very skillful, is that an issue? If he's there, you don't really necessarily want him. VJ's the guy you want. He's not there. You don't want Tre Johnson. You don't want Khaman Maluach. Trading down seems like a prudent move to me. So I'm on board with it. It comes with the risk of, if he's not there, then who do you take? And what value do you get by moving down and letting other teams leapfrog you? But if you can get the same guy that you wanted anyway, trading down is a great move. So I would consider it. You just have to be very in tune with what other teams are likely to do. And then I'd be very curious if the Pelicans were to swoop in and take pick 4, what they'd do. Because I think that's not an obvious decision either.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the Pelicans move up to 4, I think they would go with Ace. James and I talked about it. They've had some success, even though, again, it's a different front office, but they've had success with Trey Murphy. Trey Murphy
I love Trey Murphy.
17th pick in 2021. He averaged 5 points a game as a rookie. Year 4, 20 points per game. And if you think that Ace is better than Trey Murphy was as a rookie, then I could see how a team could say, we've done it with Trey Murphy. If we can make a better version of him, who's also younger, then that's worth the risk. In my opinion, Charlotte needs to really take a long, hard look at Khaman Maluach. Now, I understand he may be a high risk, high reward guy. It may not be as safe. They took a swing for the fences with Tidjane Salaun last year. And some people in the fan base may say, we can't do it again. We can't take a guy that's a risk. But Charlotte fans they know more about Maluach than they know about Tidjane Salaun, just because he played in their own backyard. I think Charlotte needs help at the 5. I said it time and time again. You can't bring Mark Williams back after you traded him, and then whatever happened. I still don't even know what happened in that trade. I don't know If the Lakers decided that they don't want to do the deal, I don't know exactly what happened, but there's some issues there. I don't think you can bring him back. And then with Yusuf Nurkic, I mean, he can't be your 5. He doesn't even fit their timeline. So I think they should take a long, hard look at Maluach. With that being said, do you think because TJ was such a reach, according to some, and he was so raw, that they can go back-to-back drafts by taking a really high upside swing? Or do you think Maluach is not too much of a risk?
I like the idea, especially if you can get something back for Mark Williams. I've mentioned that before as well, that Maluach seems to make sense for Charlotte, and I think he does a lot of things very well that Charlotte would be appreciative of. And I also would contend, you'd say Derek Queen has a high ceiling and maybe a high floor, but like if you look at Maluach, he should be the more of the project between those two. But I'd argue his floor is higher right off the bat, because defensively he's going to be impactful, and offensively he's a 99th percentile pick and roll man, and he's able to play at the level of the screen and defend the glass as someone who's recovering. He can play as a drop guy, and I think, yes, there's a lot of improvement to be made, but I think too much is being spoken about of the ceiling, which is implying that there's not much production immediately. And I think there's going to be growth, certainly, but I think for all bigs, there's this natural learning curve, and his learning curve has been so steep. He's been at 14 years old to 18 years old, has improved so much that I think he's actually a far better basketball player than people say. Like, I think if you're to watch game film of all the top prospects and you choose their best game, his game film is better than just about everyone's when he plays Alabama. Watch him defend Mark Sears in space. Watch him impact the whole way they ran their team. And I can see a world where, his ceiling, like you alluded to, is so high that it ends up being worthwhile. But I also could see a world where his immediate impact is solid and he's able to block shots, he's able to finish things, and he gets better and his improvement accelerates, and it's an expedited process. So I'm not anti-Maluach at 4. I don't think it would necessarily be my pick, but I actually see the vision there, particularly if you can figure out what to do with Mark Williams before picking Maluach and then saying, well, we got both, so do you want this guy? I think that's kind of handicaps them.
All right, you talked about it before with some redundancy with Ace Bailey and Brandon Miller. Just paint the picture of how it could possibly work if Charlotte were to select Ace Bailey at 4, if someone like VJ Edgecombe ends up going number 3 to Philly.
Well, you get a guy who can shoot the ball. You get a guy who's long, and the NBA really is prioritizing defensive or size and versatility. I think he's able to score the basketball, and you could have your choice of which one of those two skinny wings is the guy you want to build around more offensively later. And that's never a bad thing to have too many that you can have be initiators of your offense. I think he has more defensive upside than I felt about Brandon Miller. Speaking of Ace is younger and he's longer, and he's someone I think can protect the rim as a secondary rim protector. And I don't think they are mutually exclusive. They can play together, because one can play a 2, one can play a 3, and you could even go small if you really believe in your rim protection, and you could have them play 3 and the 4 in time. Not quite yet, because they're both slender builds, but I think you could in time have that happen. You play next to a big rim protector, whether it's a Maluach type or in this case Mark Williams, and you have LaMelo Ball alleviate some of those risks of the ball not swinging. That either of those guys are not great passers. LaMelo Ball can play and alleviate some of those concerns. And you get a chance of a guy that has the comparisons that were drawn to him at the beginning of the year, the Paul Georges, the Tracy McGrady's, and those may be outlandish now, especially considering that there's been this drop. But let me remind you, like, as of 3 weeks ago, if you said who's 1, 2, 3, when the lottery came out, who's 1, 2, 3, everyone's saying 1, 2, 3 is going to be Cooper and the 2 Rutgers guys. So if you're to get him at 4, 5, 6, wherever it ends up being, I feel like teams should still believe it's a steal, because he's got the talent that put him in that top 3 contention for years and years. And I do think that some of the stuff really does matter. The intel matters. The upside concerns do matter. His length not being as high, but every team knew that. So I think part of this is smoke. And if you're to get him at 4, there should be no qualms.
Olipop is a new kind of soda. It is made for people who love the classic taste of soda, but want something that supports their health. And with just 2 to 5 grams of sugar and 9 grams of prebiotic fiber in every can, Olipop is re-imaging soda in a way that is better for your gut. That's because these traditional sodas are loaded with sugar. For example, there's 39 grams of sugar in a regular Coke or 44 grams in an orange Fanta. With Olipop, it totally flips the script with just a fraction of the sugar. There's no artificial sweeteners, and it has gut-friendly ingredients like OliSmart, a blend shown to support digestive and overall health. It is a soda that tastes like the real thing, but actually does something good for your body. So, what flavor would you try first? Would it be cherry cola, classic grape, or maybe even Dr. Goodwin, which is like their Dr. Pepper dupe? Here's what makes it cool. You can get a free can of Olipop. All you have to do is buy 2 cans in a store, and they will reimburse you for one. So head to drinkolipop.com/lockedonnba to claim your free can. And you can find Olipop nearest you, but you have to go to drinkolipop.com/lockedonnba. That is drinkolipop.com/lockedonnba. So what would that mean for Tidjane Salaun? Because basically they're taking another wing. Is it like, hey, buddy, you didn't show much, get in where you fit in? Or is it a situation where you're like, you knew he was raw in the first place, so why draft him if you're going to draft over him the following year? What's your thought on that?
I don't think there's anything wrong with drafting over people unless you've seen like this dude is unbelievable and he's going to be untouchable and he's absolutely explicitly said is in the future plans. Then what's wrong with taking a player that's the best player available that you think could be better? And I think I watched Tidjane Salaun shoot in the first row, watching him shoot warm-ups, and it just doesn't look good. So what's wrong with taking a guy like Ace Bailey? And Tidjane's got a big body. Like there's a world where you could have all of those guys still play together if he does pan out. So I don't really conform to the idea of, oh, you just drafted a young guy and therefore you shouldn't draft another young guy at the same position. Like basketball is becoming more and more positionless, and I know part of that's overstated, but I think those guys could line up 2 through 4. If Tidjane Salaun gets better, Brandon Miller stays like a promising prospect, and Ace Bailey plays well, I think you could have those guys play a jumbo size 2 through 4, and it'd be great. Or you have 2 of them start and 1 come off the bench. These are good problems to have, in my opinion.
All right, you're the GM of the Charlotte Hornets. You have the 4th pick in the draft, and Philadelphia took Ace Bailey at number 3. What direction are you going in? Who are you moving? Just you're in total control. What's the first move you make?
I would ask about what the market is for Mark Williams. Like that is probably the first thing that I would be doing presently if I were there. I'd ask about that, and I'd consider Khaman Maluach. I'd consider trading down even for Khaman Maluach or Kon Knueppel. But I think I'd end up just taking Tre Johnson because I believe very highly in him. And if I get a guy like Tre Johnson, there's going to be some suitors that would say, maybe I'll trade up for him. Maybe LaMelo Ball becomes a person that has more and more belief around the NBA. But I think you just take the best player available. He can slot in as the 2 guard and be very good. You can give him some staggered minutes between he and LaMelo Ball and see if he can play the point guard. And I think you're handsomely rewarded for taking the best player available because he also fits in positionally and in the timeline.
So you would take Tre Johnson at number 4 regardless.
I mean, honestly, what I do is I trade him to the Utah Jazz, though. I'm for those of you listening, I am a diehard Jazz fan. But the honest to goodness thing is I think he's the best player available, so I would take him.
In your opinion, why haven't you heard much about Charlotte and Tre Johnson? Like I haven't heard anything about that match.
I don't know, but it makes me nervous because it's somehow going to happen and really ruin my draft night. So I don't know. I don't know why, because I think he fits in nicely. You could have him play off the ball, and at the worst, you're kind of getting like an Emmanuel quickly in coming off screens and knocking down jump shots and attacking. And when you give him extra minutes, he can be the primary option. And at the best, maybe you get the Devin Booker side of things or a Bradley Beal side of things where he comes off the ball and is an assassin off pin downs. So I really like the fit, actually. And I think that he should have the ball in his hands, and that's the best usage of Tre Johnson. But it's not like the only usage of Tre Johnson. He could play with LaMelo Ball, and that's what concerns me. If I were Charlotte, I'd be very, very happy to, I wouldn't say sprint to the podium, but I'd run to the podium.
Yep. Do you think it's a situation where they've probably done something secretly? I don't even know. I'd have to check and see. But it's just weird how it just seems like it skips over. Like it's, you hear the names, but when it comes to Charlotte, the names I'm constantly hearing are VJ and Kon, and Tre's name hasn't been mentioned, which could be one of those things where you're like, maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe that's who they really, really like. I mean, you think about it, Orlando and Banchero was something that you hadn't really heard much of. Everything was pointing towards, oh, they love Jabari. Oh, they love Chet.
I didn't believe that, though. I don't know. That makes me nervous. As I was speaking, I started getting nervous that saying this is going to happen because the fit's pretty. So I really hope they don't listen to this and sway themselves into taking Tre Johnson.
Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. Again, check out the earlier episode where Leif and I, we talked about VJ Edgecombe versus Jeremiah Fears. And obviously this episode, we talked about the Charlotte Hornets. Can't make any promises, but we may go live later on tonight, whenever you're listening to this, but we will have a few more live episodes late at night before the 2025 NBA draft. But once again, thank you for making this your first episode or your first listen of the day. We are out of here.